Hello, Foxy listeners, and welcome to episode 170. On today's episode, I sit down with Dr. Angela Mulrooney to talk about burning down what's holding you back, how to transform your personal brand, and how to elevate your credibility. So let's jump in. I'm Tanya Fox, and you're listening to Fox Talks Business Podcast. I started my career in the corporate world, but always played to my own tune and loved to think outside of the box. This didn't always serve me well with the bosses, so I made the decision to become an entrepreneur. And that little seed of entrepreneurial curiosity continued to grow as I branched out into retail, service, and franchise businesses. Now, I have been fortunate to have amazing successes in the last 2 decades, but they did not come without some really big failures and even bigger lessons learned. And that's why I started this podcast, not just to share the failures, but to show you how you can turn every failure into a success. We're going to hear from some amazing humans from around the world that are going to share their stories of the good, the bad, and the motivational entrepreneurial life has to offer. After all, life is too short to make all of the mistakes yourself, so why not learn from each other? And of course, we're going to have some fun, because as I always say, well, you know what? I'll tell you that at the end of the episode. Hello, Foxy listeners. Thank you for joining us today. I'm really excited for today's guest. She has an amazing story. I'm not going to dive into it because I'm going to let her tell it, but I'm so excited, Angela, to have you on the show. Thank you so much for coming on.
My pleasure. It's an honor.
So you tell the story of your background because you actually, you're actually a doctor. So how did that start transitioning to where you are? Because it's sort of interesting.
So my original plan in life was to be a dentist. That was my plan since I was 2 years old. And at 24, it came true. And I had this journey of being an associate. And then I reached a point where I was like, I'm kind of maxed out on what I can do here. So I either need to go and become a specialist or I need to open my own practice. The opportunity to buy someone else's practice came along, and I took it from this broken down bread and butter practice to this high-end, high-tech practice that catered to people who were afraid of the dentist. So that was my first venture into branding. And unfortunately, when I had it at the perfect point where I had an amazing team and I was doing the skills that I wanted on amazing patients, I got injured. And it really brought my life to a complete halt because I had no idea what I was supposed to do without a drill in my hand. And it took 6 months for them to figure out that I was never going to drill again. And so I listened to my advisors, and everyone was like, "You built this brand, people know you in the community, other dentists are referring you patients. So just keep it. You've worked really hard to build this thing, so let's just keep it." So I listened to them for 2.5 years and struggled through and dumbed down my brand to being very basic, because people sent me patients because they didn't want to deal with people who were afraid of the dentist. So bring me in associates, they're like, "This is not what I signed up for. This is way too much work." So unfortunately, I had to revert back to kind of a version of what I had originally bought. Then 2015 came around, which I was in Calgary, which is an oil-based city, and the economy went and just took a complete nosedive, and I could see the nosedive coming, and I was like, you know what? Every time I walk into the practice, my heart aches, and it's time to pass the torch on to someone else. So I decided to fire sell my practice for half of its value because I wanted to get it done before I could not get it done. And everyone thought I was insane for that because they could see I was leaving all this value on the table, but I also could see if I didn't do it, I could potentially be stuck with this. And my prediction actually was correct because Calgary hasn't really fully recovered from what happened in 2015. So after I sold the practice, I was unleashed into the world to rediscover what I was supposed to do without a drill in my hand. And I didn't want to touch dentistry for a year because people knew what had happened to me. And so when I met dentists, they were like, "Oh, I'm so sorry that this happened." And there was pity on their face, and I needed to get strong again and find myself. So I went back to dancing professionally and built my dance company called Unleashed Dance Company, named after being unleashed unexpectedly from my dental career. 6 months into that adventure, I had built the second largest adult-based Latin company in my city. And it allowed me to really start to take a step back and look at all these pieces of what had transpired in my dental career. I had an amazing skill set that most people don't achieve in a whole career, let alone in the short time that I was practicing. I had gone through losing my career. I had built a niche practice that had a referral base to it. I was able to, take this broken down practice, turn it into something that was amazing. So I decided to take the information that I had gleaned from working in my practice and be able to help other people with it. So I built Unleashing Dentistry's Potential to help people with that. Now, I didn't really want to spend a ton of money on marketing, so I decided to try the organic route, took to LinkedIn and started talking about what I knew about branding, about dentistry, about niching. And in a year, I went from 200 to 12,000 industry followers. And people started to go, how did you do that? Because I'd gone from being a dentist very known locally to being known in North America very, very fast. And so I started dabbling with other people's LinkedIn profiles because I wanted to see if I was unicorn, or if this was actually replicatable. And so my entrepreneurial colleagues let me play with their accounts, and I was actually able to replicate my results. So I launched Unleashing Influence January 2020, the 17th of January, March 17th, 2020, Canada got shut down. And my dental company I knew was going to get shut down because the whole dental industry got shut down because they didn't know how to deal with the virus. My dance company got shut down. And my 2.5 team members that were part of Unleashing Influence were like, you need to lay us off because everyone else is getting laid off. We totally understand. And I said, buckle in. We are going to see if we can take this to the moon. And by 10 months into the pandemic, I had 14 full-time team members. So we were able to take it to the moon by just buckling down and believing in what we could do. January 2021, I decided to move to Nicaragua because I decided I did not want to be stuck in a quarantine snowbank anymore. I wanted to be in a tropical country. And when I got here, I realized I had built a monster that had me captive. I was sitting in paradise working 100 hours a week, and I hated my life. So I started divesting everything down. I actually sold the dance company before I left Canada. I sold off the agency part, which included all my team members from Unleashing Influence. So I could just focus on what I did best, which is personal branding and taking people through pivots. And then I sold Unleashing Dentistry's Potential as well. So it took a little bit of bravery to strike that match and start burning down the things that weren't working for me. But what it did was allowed me to really niche into my mastery, which is the premise of everything that I teach. So I finally took my own advice and started getting rid of all those distractions and making sure that I could really go deep into what I did best.
So what was the moment that you sort of realized, this is too much? Because like you said, you were kind of like at that precipice where you're like, I'm in a beautiful place, but I'm sort of trapped.
When I started realizing I was crying every day because I was so tired and so overwhelmed. And I took that as a not very good sign. It showed that I wasn't really very happy. I was socially isolating as well because I was just so tired at the end of the day. And I realized there had to be more to life. And I'd come down here to really re-stimulate parts of my life and figure out what was that piece that was missing. And it became very clear in the glaring heat and the isolation from, the people that I knew and my circle of influence and my friends and whatnot, that this was one of the big things that I needed to change in my life.
And do you find the culture there helped you too? Like, I don't know a lot about it, but I know like from my mom, like living on islands and stuff, they're very like carefree. Like I remember visiting Puerto Rico and like the stores would be closed like midday. And I'd be like, what is going on? And she's like, oh, it's hot. So most people are napping right now. And I'm like it just didn't compute with me. And now I'm like, that is a lovely, lovely way to live life.
Yes. Well, there's the people who live here locally. And what I love about Nicaragua compared to some other tropical places is the simplicity and the can-do attitude. Like you'll see three people on a motorcycle, someone carrying a bicycle, and you wouldn't be able to pull that off in Canada because people are like, that is not safe, but they get things done. But they also find joy in the simplest things. And there are a lot of expats in the community that I'm in. I'm in San Juan del Sur, and some of them are retired, and so they're just like, oh, I'm just going to surf when the tide is good. And I'm like, well, that doesn't quite fit in with the way that I run my business. But it also gives you that frame of reference that things don't have to be so hard. You don't have to work that many hours. It doesn't have to be that complicated. Like, how can you figure out the simplest inputs to give you the maximum output? And really, that's what I've been studying since I let go and burned down the things that weren't working for me is, how can I simplify? How can I simplify? How can I simplify? And every day there's another layer that I can dig into to create the simplest business that I possibly can to maximize my income and maximize my time while I'm actually working.
Well, and this is kind of what I want to dig in with you because I think there's so many times that, especially I'm in Canada too. I'm in Alberta, so I know exactly what you're talking about. But um, that that is a culture that almost has been created that needs to be burnt down. Is that people figure if I'm working really hard, I'm successful. If I'm burning out, it means I'm doing everything I should be doing. And I
Mhm.
know even for myself, when I'm like, oh no, like I love, only working a couple of days a week if I want to, if I choose to, that's like a foreign concept to people. So how can people sort of, figure out that narrative, but also figure out, you know, how to find out what's holding them back? Because I think a lot of times people feel like something is not working, but I have no idea what. I just know something isn't.
Mhm. So let's address the mindset part first. Even now, I still get sucked back into it because I'm like, oh, yeah, I'm so tired. I can't even go out on Friday night. I just need to sleep and hang out with my puppy. And I'm like, this is not life, Angela. This is that martyrdom of being an entrepreneur that is really sick, actually. I think it is a sickness in our society to have that badge of honor that you put in so many hours that you can't even function. So it's not going to like suddenly change overnight. I was lucky when I was a dentist. I had this coach who was like, yep, you're going to take 10 weeks vacation a year. You're going to work 6 weeks on, take a week off. And I was the healthiest entrepreneur I could have ever been. As a dentist, I was producing way more than anyone else I knew per hour because of that mindset. And I always have to remind myself, okay, 6 weeks on, 1 week off, 6 weeks on, 1 week off. And I have to actually bargain with my assistant because I'm like, do not ask me during those weeks off to fit anything in. I'm supposed to be off so I can actually get that creative juice going. But it's tempting for me to be like, oh, I can just sneak this person in, and then suddenly my week is not off anymore.
Mhm.
So it really is, you have to put an effort to retrain that mindset, and it is not easy. You kind of need an accountability buddy or an assistant who is like, no, you said we're not going to change this, so that they keep the rules there for you, because you need boundaries as an entrepreneur. It's really easy to be like, oh yeah, I can totally do that. And you go outside your skill set or you go outside of your hours because it feels good to be chasing this passion and it doesn't necessarily feel like work. But you also need that downtime to step away from it and actually have those creative juices go. Now, the second part of your question was, can you remind me?
Yeah, about like people figuring out like being stuck in that. I know that something is not working, but I've no idea what it is that's holding me back. I just feel like it should be different.
So they need to get on a discovery call with me. Haha, just kidding. No, but what we usually do is when we get on a call like that, it's like, Kate, what are these pieces of what you actually want to do? Because we can look at what everything's going wrong and you might be able to be like, oh, but I still need to keep doing that. What I want you to look at is what you actually want to do. If I had to allow you to only do 3 things for the next 5 years, what were the 3 tasks, those skills that you would want to use, that you're masterful at, that you're passionate about, that you could be happy subscribing to? And then look at everything else that you're doing and see what doesn't fit into those 3 S's. And it really becomes simple. On my whiteboard at home, I have my 3 S's. There's 3 things I'm allowed to say yes to. And I have it on my phone as well. So if I'm having one of those weak moments where I'm like, oh, I could totally do that, I remind myself, no, that doesn't fit into my yeses. I have amazing people that I work with that I can refer that work off to so that they can be living in their passion with that work and helping that person at a much higher level than when I compromise what I want to do. But the beginning point of actually figuring out what is wrong is actually looking at what you really want to do. What are you passionate about? What is that North Star that you're chasing and the legacy that you want to leave in this world that gets you excited? And then start lighting matches and burning down those other things that aren't subscribing to those yeses. And again, you're going to be tempted. It's like trying to trying to get out of being a martyr as an entrepreneur. You have to keep reminding yourself, and it is a major mindset shift, that this is what you're doing. You're not allowed to do this anymore. You're not allowed to work 100 hours a week anymore. You want to be healthy. You want to be living into that passion. So you have to constantly take those little steps and remind yourself over and over again of what you have made a deal with yourself to actually do.
Yeah, and I think that's so true. I think we get stuck in those mindsets of going, well, of not going, this is what I really want to do, that sometimes people mistake that for I'm really good at doing this. Because I think
Yes.
though, do you think like those can be, it can be the same thing, but they can be two different things? Because there's some things I'm really good at doing, but I don't want to do it for a living.
And it is tempting when you like most people who come to me, they have all these different skill sets. So they're good at lots of different things because they've taken courses or they were in a position that they become masterful at that. But when they look at how they want to live their life, this doesn't really align with it. So you have to start pushing that away and saying no to that. So you down level the work that you're not doing and start up leveling the work that you actually want to do. And again, especially if you're going through a pivot, it's tempting to be like, oh, but I can do this. And I've actually had a conversation recently with a potential client who she loves doing this thing, but she also can do this. And I was like, well, I actually need someone who can do that. She's like, oh, I'll totally do it for you. And I said, I can't. I know you're not passionate about this. And it would be a massive disservice to you for you to take this on with me because now you're getting pulled back to something that you don't actually want to be doing. So refer me to someone who actually does this in your circle that loves it. And then when I'm ready, when the thing that you are passionate about, if I need it, then I'm happy to hire you for that. But I'm not going to hire you for something that you're not passionate about because then I'm going against my ethics for one thing. And I'm also hurting your ability to move into what you're passionate about.
So let's talk a little bit about how, let's say that somebody does have an idea, like they're like, okay, I know these things that I want to do, but now I almost have to get people to know that this, I'm not doing that other stuff, that this is what really what I want to do. And I know a lot of that goes towards personal brand. So how do you start creating, or how do you start transforming that brand into that new stuff?
So I get people to figure out what the niche is. So what is the one thing that they really do well? And then there's three other things underneath that that they can talk about. But we want to have that one major North Star with three little stars pointing towards that as well, that they can be focusing their content on. And you got to drive it hard. You may have to go and if you look up your name and you're still majorly associated with some things that are your past, you may have to go in and get people to change your bio out. They may have to reduce that link so that you can start building up the links to what you actually want to be showcasing. But LinkedIn is one of the best places, especially if you're a professional, to really build that personal brand because you can feature things about what you are passionate about. You can start building your feed up with the topics that you are masterful at, that North Star and the three substars that you want to be showcasing. And you have a choice in what you showcase. So be intentional. You may see a really cool article about something that you want to share, but if you're sharing it, is that taking you off that brand message? Or can you take that and write something about it while you're sharing it so it showcases how those things are linked? Because what I find is most people kind of throw spaghetti against the wall and hope something is going to stick, and they appear helter-skelter, they appear chaotic, they appear disorganized, and they don't appear masterful because one day they're talking about this topic and then there's another topic over here, they share something over here and something over here, and so they're very confusing to their market. You want to hit people over the head over and over again with what you are masterful at. Keep your content on point, keep it intentional with driving to that emphasis on the mastery that you want people to know you for. And the more you talk about stuff that you want to be known for, the more you become known for it because they see that you are on point, you are sticking to that niche. And that is what makes people believe that you are a master, that you are an expert in what they actually need for that topic.
So when you're talking about like sharing an article, because I know that sometimes people might be like, oh my God, like I don't have time to like write all of this stuff. If I'm understanding right, one of the things that they can do is write their own thoughts on what it is that they read and release that to kind of tie that together.
Yeah, that's not ideal. Honestly, a lot of people are not good writers, but they might be good at speaking about something. Transcribe what you spoke about and then tidy that up and make that into an article. So you're recycling your content without having to come up with a completely different topic that you've never spoken about and write that out. But if you find something really inspiring that you do want to share because you think it's going to add value, show why this fits into your brand with what you write on it. But I do prefer, if you're going to be really trying to be the expert in something, put out your original content over and over and over again. Smatter the odd thing that you're going to share, but don't make sharing other people's stuff the premise of your feed, because then it shows that you're just sharing other people's stuff. It doesn't really show that you have original thoughts. And we all have original thoughts about what we're doing. And so that's really important to be showcasing.
So, and I guess this ties into, because doing that and releasing your own stuff helps you to sort of elevate your credibility then as well.
It does. And it helps you to really get a hold of your expertise. The more you talk about things, like the clients that I work with, I want them on podcasts being a guest, because someone's going to ask you questions that you have never thought to ask yourself. And so at the end of it, you have this enlightenment and now a completely different dimension to your information that you had never thought about before. And so the more you put out, the more you talk about it, the more you write about it, the deeper your understanding, because you're also going to find little Swiss cheese holes in your knowledge. And then you're going to go and find out more about it. You're going to read a book, you're going to watch a podcast, you're going to do some research into that topic so that you, again, keep going deeper and deeper with your mastery.
And what, you had mentioned LinkedIn a couple of times. What sort of drew you to that originally?
Because the dentists who are really entrepreneurial are on LinkedIn. The ones who are not entrepreneurial are on Facebook, and Facebook is really distracting. So I wanted to go after those people who really want to take their careers to the next level, who were like me, who were super overachievers, type A. They want to know the roadmap to get there faster. They don't want to fumble through. And so that was where I found the right people. And then with Unleashing Influence, again, I go after professionals who have that expertise that they want to pivot to become a thought leader with, to change the world with what they know. So again, those people I found were on LinkedIn. I did try Facebook, I tried Instagram, and my method of how I share information, which is tips and tricks, it's not going out and dancing. I can totally dance and entertain people, but that wasn't it wasn't part of my archetype in Unleashing Influence, and it didn't come across the right way. So I have actually shut down my Facebook and my Instagram, and all I do is LinkedIn day in and day out, and that 100% feeds my company.
And do you have any tips? Because I think there's some people that are, a lot of people that listen to my podcast are on LinkedIn, and we connect together. But sometimes I hear that what they struggle with is actually getting that connection with people, because it is getting easier and easier to just like follow somebody and have them follow you back. But it's that engagement piece that they struggle with. Do you have any tips for them on that?
You want to have kind of two things that are feeding you. So the content is kind of what we've been talking about, putting out what you actually do and how you think about things. But then also you need to send messages out, because you need to grow your audience. And just putting out good content, unless it gets picked up by someone who shares it and then their audience sees it and then they connect with you, you're kind of gambling. But if you are sending out messages to people who are those ideal clients who are likely to want to consume the content that you're putting out there, you're stacking the deck in your favor. And you want to go after two kinds of audiences: the people who you are going to work with directly, and the people who are potentially going to refer you who have the same audience. So you're building out a network of people who work with your audience, and you're building out a network of those people who you're hunting directly to actually become clients.
And I think that's, thank you for that. Because I think that sometimes people get stuck and, like they get told a lot, like, just build your audience. And they're like, great. How? How am I supposed to do that? Like, where am I supposed to go with this? So for you, changing and having, all of these pivots that happen, what was one thing that sort of comes to your mind that, you sort of struggled with, and how did you overcome that struggle?
Well, all the pivots that I went through until I have arrived at what I'm doing exactly today, those came from me not understanding what I should contribute to the world. I was so lost after I lost my dental career, and it wasn't my choice to leave dentistry. My body failed me and I had to step out. And what I suggest is, don't do what I did. Like, don't build separate brands around each of your talents. Figure out what are those favorite talents that you want to use. How can you pull them together in a way that you're maximizing the best crayons in your box, right? Your best toolkit. Pull it together and make that into an offering, and package it in a way that's easy for the world to understand. Like, one of my first business coaches, he saw me with my dance company and my business coaching company for dentists. And then I was looking at building this personal branding company. He was like, I don't want to work with you. I think you're a flake. And then he started digging into me and digging into people who he knew were also connected to me. And they're like, no, Angela's not a flake. She has the ability to be high caliber at everything she's doing. But to the world, most people can't understand that. So when you're trying to build all these disparate companies, it's really hard for the world to understand how that could possibly be. So can you pull everything under one umbrella? Maybe you have these sub companies, but have this one major brand that you're representing as a human being for these corporate companies, and package it in a way that they get how you interact with the world, what you're trying to do to change the world. And then you have these other offerings that come out from that. But you have to kind of have that umbrella that is easy for people to understand. And you need to spoon feed them so it's easy for them to understand. You don't want them figuring out, like, how does she run a dance company? How does she have a dental company? How does she have a social media company? Because
Yeah, how do those things yeah, right. And I get that. And I relate with that a lot, because people always try to connect the two together. Because I know there was, at one point I had a bread franchise, a taekwondo facility, a craft store, and people were like, how do they connect? And I'm like, stop trying to connect to them. They don't connect. Like, yeah. I was squirrely.
Totally. Right.
But I agree with you that I think, trying, obviously not doing it that way, because I wouldn't suggest it to anybody, but, having that umbrella and figuring out, can I connect these things together? And then maybe even sitting down and going, if you can't connect it, then is it something really that you should be doing? Because I think some people fall into that trap of going, but I know I can make money if I do the old thing that I used to do. I know I can make money at that because I was making money at it. It doesn't make me happy, but it makes me money, and they get stuck.
Yeah. But the thing is, any experience that you've had or expertise that you've developed, it's never going to fully go away. Like, I'll give you an example from my brand as well. Like, my dance background still comes into play when I'm working with professional speakers to teach them how to use their body, to use the space, to present well, to change the energy and the flow through the camera. Right? My business coaching company for dentists, I still pull in systems. Like, I'm helping them build out systems, build out automations so that they can take their personal brand and turn it into a business that is getting sales. It's actually giving them money for sharing their expertise with the world, right? And then the Unleashing Influence agency was LinkedIn, building your personal brand on LinkedIn. How do you create that influence? So even though those were three disparate companies, I've been able to pull those skills together in a way that I get to use the stuff that makes me happy. I'm not telling people right off the bat, I'm going to make you amazing on camera, right? But that little hook, that point of entry is what you need to find. And then you get to use those skills in a way that is helpful to people, but not confusing them with the little point that you're putting out there, that little hook that you're putting into the marketplace.
I love that, because I think it's so true. We don't, sometimes we figure if we're not using that for work, then we have to completely let it go. But I love what you're saying is it's not about letting it go. It's just that that's part of your toolbox, but nobody has to see what tools you have in your toolbox. They just want to see the result. So you can still use them, but they don't have to be the focus. Because I think sometimes people get stuck in that, right? Like we were saying, I'm really, really good at this, but it's not the main thing that I want to do, but there's still some expertise from there that I can use to pass on to other people. I just don't want to do the work.
Exactly.
So if someone's interested in, connecting with you more or working with you, what type of people do you like taking? And then how can they connect with you further? Obviously on LinkedIn, but
yeah, LinkedIn is my main thing, but there's usually two kinds of people I work with. So I have entrepreneurs who have come out of the professional world. They've been trying to go out on their own. They've built all these amazing offerings and they have made $0 from all that effort. And so they're coming to me going, something is missing. I know I can change the world to what I know these programs are transformative, but nobody seems to want it. So I help package them, pivot them, help them build the business, build the offering, build the sales behind it so that this talent that they have can actually be used. And there's always a way to package them, and they're just missing something. And again, it's usually throwing spaghetti against the wall, throwing out too many tools, and so they're confusing to the market. The other kind of person who comes to me is usually someone who is quite senior in their career. They have, usually been in an executive position, sometimes C-suite, and they'll come to me and they go, okay, I'm tired of being part of corporate. I'm tired of being vulnerable there. I want to take my expertise and create my legacy. And so they're coming to me to be repackaged, figure out, what is the stake they want to put in the ground, their claim to fame in the industry. What do they actually want to do in the industry to create that legacy? And then same process, build their personal brand, build the automation behind it, teach them how to sell themselves, build that offering so that they can be making 100K to $1 million off of whatever that offering is, from mastermind to coaching programs to consulting to speaking.
Oh, I love that. So what are the ways, obviously on LinkedIn, what will they search for on LinkedIn? And as well, let us know your website. This is the time for shameless plugs.
So I'm listed as Dr. Angela Mulrooney with 2 O's in Mulrooney on LinkedIn. And I also have a community called the Unleashing Influence Community, which is, if you are looking at developing your personal brand or you're going through a pivot, you can ask to be part of that group, and I would love to have you. You'll get invited to have a conversation with me as well when you're ready to talk about your personal brand. Or if you want to check out my website, it's unleashinginfluence.com.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. I think there's a lot, for people, a lot of tips that you gave us on, transforming your personal brand, on how to burn things down. Because I think sometimes we get, people are just stuck and don't know why. So I think there was a lot of great stuff for that. And people do, I think a lot of people are searching for, they want that credibility. So I think there was a lot of tips in this episode for them to start building that so that they can be that expert that they want to be.
Yes, I'm glad that is what you got out of it.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. I really, really had a great time chatting with you, and we'll make sure we have all of the links to where people can access you. And I look forward to following more of your stuff and joining your group as well.
Awesome. Thanks, Tanya.
So no matter what it is you're doing today, whether you are lighting a match or completely burning it down, or whether you're rushing over to get your ticket, make sure you take time to have fun. Because as I always say, if you're not having fun, why are you doing it?